Hello everyone and welcome to another video. My name is Lizzie and today we're going to be looking at some hidden gems of books. So what I've done, I've sorted my Goodreads read pile by the lowest number of ratings. So not the lowest like overall average, the lowest number of people who have read and rated this book on Goodreads. I think that's a good parameter for how popular a book is, how many people have read it. So we're going from lowest, and I don't know what's on there. I have some suspicions of what might be on there, but I don't know what is on there. I'm just going to go through, and the ones that I think more people should read, I'm going to tell you about. A quick little disclaimer, I guess, at the start. Most of the books, chances are going to be books that I received for a review, either directly from authors or via NetGalley, etc. Because that's how I've come across most of the less popular books that I've read. As always, in the description with the list of books, I will mark all the ones that I did receive for review. I've not been asked to mention any of them here. I've not been sponsored to mention any of them here, etc. Just as an FYI. I've got my list here, so let's see which ones come up. The first few that come up are ones that I've given like 3 stars, so I probably won't mention those. And there are some like academic ones that I thought were brilliant, but aren't necessarily, I read it for my dissertation. You might not be interested. But the first one that comes up, and I thought this would come up because I'm obsessed with this book and I can't believe it has 10 ratings on Goodreads. I cannot believe it only has 10. It needs more. More people need to read this book. And that is One Verse Multi by Sandra Santiago. I cannot tell you how good this book is. It's so good. It was my best book of January. It was the first book I read this year, and I will be very surprised if it does not make it into my top books of the year. I really, really will. It is a science fiction multiverse with trans representation, a polyamorous relationship. It's hilarious, it's insightful, it's so fresh and exciting. But also everything just makes sense. You just read it and you're like, this is of course exactly how the multiverse would be. Of course it would be ruined by capitalism. If you like your sci-fi in a speculative, non-space opera kind of vein, I mean, if you love multiverse things, I love multiverse stuff. It's up there, one of my top multiverse books ever. Honestly, I cannot praise this book highly enough. It was so good. It was so good. It was so good. I really think Sandra Santiago is going to be one to watch in the genre. And, I mean, more people really should read this book. It should be like one of the top science fiction books out there at the moment. One of the top queer books out there at the moment. Go read it. Go read it. Okay, the next one that I come across is terrible. We're not going to talk about that. Scrolling through my list. Doobie-doobie-doo, doobie-doobie-doo. Okay, so the next one, I gave it 4 stars at the time, but I might up that because, I've thought about it a lot since. And that is The Adventures of Tom Finch, Gentleman, which as of today has 57 ratings on Goodreads. I think it deserves more personally. And this is a historical fiction set in the Georgian era, so in the sort of mid-18th century to late 18th century, I would say, is kind of the setting. And Tom Finch is an illegitimate child of an earl. So he's kind of got one foot in this like aristocratic world and the other foot in the sort of gritty day-to-day underworld of Georgian London. And he is blind, he is a musician, he's a conductor and a composer, and all he wants is to prove his worth as a musician. He keeps being turned down for jobs because of his disability, and he wants to prove that he is one of the top musicians in London and should be given all of these chances. He has a sort of enemies to lovers story with a bisexual opera singer. There's a trip to France. It's like a proper swashbuckling Georgian romp. I had a great time. Definitely one to look for the historical fiction fans out there. Next up, this one has 74 ratings, and I love this book so much. I cannot wait for the sequel. I physically cannot wait. And that is Windfall by Shauna Barnett. In the words of Stefan, this book has everything. It was so much fun. It's fantasy, it's pirates, it's bisexual pirate captain and bisexual princess have a like long slow burn over the course of the series, so we're not there yet, but we're on our way. I mean, I just had the best time from start to finish. I really, really did. I signed up to the publisher's ARC reader program specifically so I could read the sequel early. Like, you know, I'm enjoying reading their other books as well, but this book is why I signed up. This next one has 155 ratings, and that is Out Front to the Following Sea by Leah Angstman. And I read this, I think it was the last book I read. It was one of the last books I read at the end of 2021. And this is a historical fiction about a young woman living in sort of early colonial America and her journey, the trials that she goes through. This is like the best of historical fiction. This book was just incredible. It was so atmospheric. It really took you on that journey with the character. And what I thought was so lovely about it, what was so great, is she was just an ordinary person trying to, you know, survive this war, and ends up being the centre of so much trouble and heartbreak, and it really puts you through the ringer, but it is worth it, I promise. The next one is actually a poetry collection with 163 ratings, When No One Is Watching by Lunathi Makanda. This is one of the first arcs I ever read, and I loved it so much. This poetry collection is incredible. It's one of the best poetry collections I've ever read. It's up there. I always like poetry collections that follow a narrative, and that's what this one really does. It explores ideas of love and loss and abuse and trauma, and it's like Rupi Kaur but with a story, with a plot. Definitely one for any poetry fans out there. This is definitely one to pick up. Next up, and I've already waxed lyrical about this book on this channel before, but I'm going to do it again. It's got 172 ratings, The Hidden Case of Ewan Forbes by Zoe Playden. And this is a non-fiction book about the last century's worth of transgender rights in the UK. As you may know, the UK is terrible in many ways, but specifically in this instance, in terms of the rights that trans people have. And this book tells the story through the true story of one individual as to how those rights have changed over the last century and why. Ewan Forbes was a Scottish baronet. He inherited through male primogeniture, which is the laws in the UK that mean that certain titles can only be inherited by men and cannot be held by women. And these titles have like actual political power, which is a whole other terrible discussion that we need to have. But Ewan Forbes inherited this title, and it was contested by his cousin because Ewan was assigned female at birth, and although he had legally changed his gender by this point, this was like the mid 20th century, his cousin said that wasn't good enough. So went to court, and Ewan won and was able to keep the baronetcy. But of course, as we know, things got worse from there. So I think this is an essential read for anyone in the UK, especially people who are interested in LGBTQ history and people who want to ally themselves with trans people and support trans people and understand how we've got to where we have. For anyone who considers themselves on the opposite side of the debate, I think you should read this, and I think it might open your eyes and, hopefully add some more understanding to the issues. I'm going to talk about one more because then everything I will have discussed has under 200. I think that's a good threshold. So the last one I'm going to tell you about is The Dangerous Kingdom of Love by Neil Blackmore, which has 175 ratings. This is another historical fiction. It follows Francis Bacon in the early Stuart era, so the early years of the reign of James I/6, depending on which side of the Scottish border you live in. There are different kinds of historical fiction, you know? There's the fun romp, there's the like dark examination of dark periods of history. Then there's just the like gritty, filthy look at how terrible humanity is, and this is where that one falls. This book was incredible. I loved it so much. Everyone is terrible, like all the characters are kind of the worst. Very much unreliable narrator, and as the story unfolds we get to see him realise quite how much he's lied to himself and by proxy us through the telling of his story, which, genius, so well executed, it's amazing. And a really tragic and heartbreaking look into what it was like to be queer at the start of the 17th century. Spoiler alert, it was not great. So yes, queer historical fiction, definitely one to go for. What a great book. So those are some hidden gems that I've come across in my time. If you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought. Let me know if there's any books that you think more people should read. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Ta-ra for now.